And a lot of the people you'll have taken on are the people who are representing the business at as the face of the business. Yes. Had you done any interviewing before? I mean, you, as an occupational psychologist, I would imagine you've kind of got a reasonable insight into people. Yeah. He says being scared sitting with an occupational psychologist. Oh, God. But did that put any extra pressure on the fact that you were looking for people who were going to be the face of Neuropartners? Yeah,
I mean, I think Joanna's right in that how someone can seem, you know, on paper as well can be very, very different to how someone is. You know, when you meet them face to face, how they interview and how they come across. And for us as an organisation, what we learned quite quickly was that you know, putting that time into finding the right person was really important, and it actually created less work for us in the longer term. And that's where, you know, the recruitment process and things changed as well. But we added in, as part of the actual recruitment process, we provided a training week on brain injury, on cognitive training, on professional work and relationships when working with our service users. Because what we were seeing was, you know, we were in a position to be able to provide someone with the skills and experience that they needed, but what we couldn't do was provide their personality. And in a training environment of about 10 people as part of the induction training, you know, personalities did come through. So as part of that training process, we included that as part of the recruitment itself. And it works out now for every maybe 15 people who go through the training, only approximately 10 people end up working with ourselves at Neuropartners. And that's because, you know, if someone isn't engaging or someone isn't proactive or initiating that conversation in that training environment, working with a vulnerable adult who's maybe experienced a, you know, kind of a life-changing event, a really traumatic experience, who's needing to be able to trust and rely on someone who's coming into their home environment is really important. And if that member of staff couldn't engage with us, you know, we didn't feel safe in sending that person out to work with a vulnerable adult at all. So it was really important for us that we added in elements to the recruitment and the selection process to ensure that that quality would be there, because our reputation, you know, and those people being the face of the organisation was incredibly important.
I want to change tack slightly, because one of the things that we are trying to build up within If We Can, You Can is some and this is all brilliant, but it's some really sort of nuts and bolts practicalities. So we'll come back to some of the kind of softer stuff, but how aware were you, and what were the legal implications of taking people on, and how did you cope with them? Can we start with you, Emily?
I had absolutely no idea, really. I mean, I'd been an employee myself in a small business, but I'd never actually had to deal with any of the sort of legal or payroll side of things. And I think I wasn't quite prepared for how many things I actually had to consider. I think the best advice I can give you is actually to phone up the HMRC and actually speak to them, because I looked at their website, I read it all, I sort of tried to fill out the forms, and I just got completely stuck. I didn't understand the terminology they were using. So actually calling them up and actually talking it through with them, it helped me realise which bits applied to me and which bits didn't. And sort of having to register as an employer, and they send you the software, and having to do proper payroll and working out national insurance and all that sort of thing. It was a bit of a baptism of fire, but it's once you kind of get the hang of it, it does. And I know that it can also be difficult, because we're at the stage now where we've got less than 5 employees. And I know that when you go above that, the legislation and everything changes and it becomes a lot more complicated. So it's trying to work out whether it's worth us taking on that additional person at this point and making things twice as complicated or not. So there is a lot of paperwork involved, and a lot of things sort of insurance-wise and all that sort of thing that I hadn't realised before, and how detailed it has to be. That, like Joanna said, you have to presume that people have no common sense, because you have to safety train them on everything from leaving the building to opening doors, everything. You have to explain to people so that they don't accidentally injure themselves and things like that. And it was difficult, and it sort of still is a learning experience, but it is worth it when you get over that initial person and you've kind of got everything in place. Adding additional employees becomes easier until you sort of go into the larger numbers.
So how much work was it to take somebody on?
For me, as I've sort of said before, I kind of know my strengths and I know myself well enough to know that I'm not going to deal well with lots of paperwork and lots of complex forms and things like that. I outsourced a lot of it. Yeah, that's the person. No, I outsourced a lot of it to my accountant, and she sat down with me and said, "This is what it's going to be like. This is what you need to go through." And she did a full checklist, and she put initials next to every piece on the checklist. And some of them belonged to me, and I had to sort them out, and some of them were her initials. And we kind of worked together to get through it, because I just knew, left to my own devices, for starters, I was far too busy. I was working stupid hours, and you know, just trying to juggle everything anyway was impossible. So I did know that it was necessary and it had to be done, but I knew that I wasn't going to be good at it. So I thought, right, this is time to get somebody who really knows what they're doing. And I'm pleased that I did that, because it would just have been a headache and I probably would have made loads of mistakes. So I must say I left a lot of that to my accountant, and I think it's probably good advice if you know you're going to struggle with that. But I must say she taught me through everything, and she explained it all to me so that I did have an understanding of what was happening. But I just didn't have to go through the very nitty-gritty bits and all of the paperwork side of things. So that was a big relief for me, because I'm not good at that stuff.
And it's that realisation that there's only so many hours in the week, and if you're wanting to get out there and be growing your business, your organisation, you know, spending 3 days going through these forms and filling things out isn't, you know, probably the best use of time. And for us, it got to a point, I mean, Emily was really experienced in that area, which was an absolute godsend for us. And you'd have kind of Jonathan and I sitting there kind of going, what, you know, can you explain that in layman's terms? But that worked really well for us. But even with that experience within the organisation, it got to a point where we needed to employ an HR manager. Yeah.
And was that a relief?
It's the best thing we ever did. Don't tell him I said that. Yeah.
We've kind of touched on it, but the impact on the business. What I mean, you know, if you were to sum it up in just a couple of sentences, what's the biggest change? If we start with you, Emily, what's the biggest change to the business?
I think the potential for growth. I think when you take on other people, the potential your business has, it gives you a larger base to work from. When it's just you, obviously, it's very difficult. If you're ill, the business is not working until you're better again. Equally, if you have anything goes wrong, it's just you. I think when you start to have more people, it becomes more of a sort of serious enterprise, and you know, it's got more potential for growth. And also it's nicer, you know, working on your own the whole time it's lonely, and you do sometimes miss kind of employment where you have colleagues that you can bounce ideas off, and also how not everything is 100% your fault anymore. So if something's forgotten, then sometimes it is someone else's fault. It's not just you, which is a big relief sometimes, that there are some things that are someone else's responsibility. So it gives you peace of mind.
And when you started to take on people, did you ever imagine you'd get to the size that you've got to now? Was that something you had a vision from the outset, or was it?
We always joked about having 10 offices in 10 years. That was something that we would have liked to have achieved. And we've been going since 2006 now. And we've got offices down in Sheffield, we've got an office over in Cumbria, we've got an office down in Leyland and one up here in the northeast as well. So we're kind of halfway there. But for us as an organisation, you know, taking on more staff has meant that the skills and the competencies and the experience that we have within the organisation actually means that we've got a whole lot more to offer as a service as well. We now have nurses, occupational therapists, we have assistant psychologists, and you know, that means that our business plan is able to slightly change as well in the way of what we can provide moving forwards.
So big impact.
Yeah,
people on.
huge, huge.
And where will employing people take Trend Bible?
Well, we've got big ambitions, and we've got a lot planned for this year and next year, after having a year of what last year I said was a plod year, because my plod is not a plod, it's like a 100-metre sprint. But what I mean by that is that we didn't develop any new products or pursue any new activities. We just did the activities that we were already doing and tried to improve those and refine those and keep the customers that we had and make sure they were really happy and try and get more business out of those customers. And then the plan for this year was to go back to kind of full steam ahead. Let's think, you know, what do we want to progress with? What do we want to expand within the business? And obviously with my new role within the business, starting to generate more business, and we're going to launch an online service this year, for example, which is a whole different realm compared to publishing the books that we publish and delivering the consultancy. So it's going to involve a lot more of my time to develop something like that. Now, last year I couldn't have devoted that time because I was still very much involved in the production side of things and the creative side of things, very much hands-on. And this year I don't need to be doing those things at all. So it's meant that it's really freed me up to do some really exciting business development that's just going to completely revolutionise. It's going to completely dominate the way that the business is, that the business operates at the moment. And we've got plans to take on probably between 4 and 5 people in the next 12 to 18 months. So because I've been freed up by just this one person who happens to be able to do all of these skills and can manage the freelancers that we already work with, and bearing in mind the freelancers started off as students at university, they've graduated, they've become freelancers for us, and the idea being that when we develop other parts of the business that they will graduate through and become full-time employees in the same way that Emily's done that. And that for me is the best way, because you know these people, you know their skills, you know where you might have training issues or things you need to help them develop in terms of their personal skills. But you know, that's the best way to grow business in my eyes, is to know who the people are. I know who my people are. I know if I need to employ 5 people tomorrow, I know exactly who they'll be and exactly what they can do. And that's a really brilliant position to be in. But the fear for me now is not to take on employees, but to continue to have this body of freelancers who I think are really talented and who I'm very concerned that they'll just get snapped up and go and work for somebody else if they're offered a full-time opportunity. So that's the fear for me now, not employing people. The fear is losing the people that I've kind of lined up and know that I want to take on.